There's a special election Tuesday in the 25th Congressional District of California. Santa Clarita, Simi Valley, Antelope Valley. Democrat Assemblywoman Christy Smith is running against former Navy fighter pilot Mike Garcia, the Republican, to fill out the term of Katie Hill, who resigned after admitting to a relationship she had had with a former campaign staff member. With us now, Dan Schnur, who teaches political science at USC and UC Berkeley and has a new podcast out through the Los Angeles World Affairs Council, Politics in the Time of Coronavirus. And Jessica Levinson, professor of election law at Loyola Law School. She has her own podcast out, The Legal Eagle File, through KCRW Radio. So thanks to both of you for joining us. Jessica, we'll start with you. Dan, chime in when you can. A lot of college-educated suburban women are in this 25th Congressional District who used to vote Republican, not any longer.
So if you look at the demographics, that district has actually been shifting to be more of a Democratic-leaning district. There's the kind of story behind this district right now is that just because the campaign is running on Zoom and online doesn't mean that it's any less nasty. So we have this really kind of vitriolic matchup where you have national figures from both sides that are weighing in. You have President Trump weighing in for Mike Garcia. You have Senators Elizabeth Warren, I believe Hillary Clinton weighing in for Christy Smith. And so everybody's kind of looking at this to try and figure out what are the broader implications.
Yeah, Jessica's right about this, not surprisingly, Conan. This was a deep red district for many years, trending purple, but I think it's heading toward a pretty deep blue at this point. Christy Smith, the Democratic candidate, ought to have an advantage in this race. When President Trump endorsed the Republican candidate, Garcia, she and her campaign leapt on that, believing, I think correctly, that Trump's unpopularity in that district would probably do Garcia more harm than good. That's not to say that he can't win, though. This is going to be a low turnout special election. All special elections are low turnout, but particularly in time of pandemic, and that may be Garcia's best chance to pull off the upset.
But remember, we're talking about a mail-in ballot for the 25th Congressional District. President Trump says that's rife with fraud. He says he wants no part of it, that the governors should have no part of it for the November election. Jessica, your response.
These charges that there is rampant voter fraud are myths. Are there sometimes problems with systems that are implemented by humans? Absolutely. But the idea that you can't depend on the vote by mail system, that it's better to risk your health and go into a polling place, that is simply not true. We need to be in a place where it's not a partisan issue. Americans feel very comfortable with that ballot. There's plenty of technology in place that upholds the integrity of the vote by mail system, and that's why now is the moment to ramp up.
Let's talk about the two leaders we see every day on our air. Dan, first, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom. Some are suggesting he is presidential timber after what we've seen thus far in his handling of this crisis. Jessica, I want you to talk about Eric Garcetti, the mayor of Los Angeles. Some have suggested that he's going to be he's cabinet potential if Joe Biden wins election. What do you think? First, Dan, you.
I think Gavin Newsom has been viewed as a presidential candidate since childhood. So that's nothing new, but there's no question that his credentials in the eyes of a lot of voters have been very significantly augmented over the last several weeks. He's justifiably received widespread praise for the way he's handled this challenge. The smartest thing that Gavin Newsom did is, after a year of being the Trump critic in chief here in California, he made an effort, rhetorically, if not substantively, to approach the challenge in a bipartisan way. Newsom was smart enough to know that even though his differences with Donald Trump are as big as the sky, that's not what voters were looking for from him right now, and he made the right call.
I think that it's too soon to rate Mayor Garcetti when it comes to handling of COVID-19, because we're maybe at the end of the first wave. This is going to be a long haul. I would say thus far, it looks like he's done very well because he was serious about shutting down the city as much as possible early. He didn't take a wait and see approach. Is there a cabinet position waiting for him? I would say that there is a very high likelihood he jumped on the Vice President Biden wagon early. He was a very vigorous proponent for the vice president, and he's an ambitious person.
The Supreme Court this week, some big cases, and they're on the telephone.
The two historic first. The Supreme Court is holding telephonic hearings, and you can listen live, as I have been. And I have to say, it is a revelation to feel like you're on a conference call with the highest jurists in the land. So what's coming up? Two really big cases next week. One deals with whether or not President Trump is going to have to turn over his financial records, or his accountant will have to turn over his financial records to either a congressional committee or to a New York State grand jury. Another question dealing with faithless electors and whether or not electors have to vote the way the people in that state have voted. Two really significant cases, and the public can listen real time while the justices are questioning the lawyers. I know maybe a little bit more exciting for me than everybody else, but I would say amazing civics lesson, really consequential cases. Tune in.
Jessica Levinson of Loyola Law School, Dan Schnur of USC and UC Berkeley, thank you to both of you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll have some final comments after this.